This morning, I'm talking about the wisdom and power of humility. For most people, humility is not a topic of conversation, let's say, that we have during meals or during the day or in our spare time. It isn't, but for whatever reason, humility is a quality that I began to think about when I was 3 years old. I was just so filled with the beauty of humility. I think it is a magnificent quality that is rare to find. But it's also a quality that is vital to have if you are on a spiritual path. If you have some time today or this week, you might want to do a search on the Agni Yoga website on humility. And in there, Helena Rourke talks about humility. The Master talks about the importance of humility. And basically says that humility is the absence of conceit and vanity. But then typically, you know, Agni Yoga gets right into the depth of what humility really means and relates humility to the fire of the Spirit. So that's an indication to us that humility and spirit go hand in hand. The more spiritual you are, the more Agni you have in your beingness, in your day-to-day life, the more humility you have. The more humility you have, the greater servant you are for hierarchy. Now let me start with this story that I found this week. It's about a great Sufi teacher. His name is Mullah Nasruddin. Mullah was outside on his hands and knees below a lantern when a friend walked up. The friend said, "What are you doing, Mullah?" His friend asked. Mullah said, "I'm looking for my key. I've lost it." So his friend got down on his hands and knees too, and they both searched for a long time in the dirt beneath the lantern. Finding nothing, his friend finally turned to him and asked, "Where exactly did you lose it?" Nasruddin replied, "I lost it in the house, but there is more light out here." I just got so tickled with that. So humility. Humility is one of the greatest qualities that we can have because it is the result. Listen to this. This is so different than what most of you really think humility is. I would betcha. Anyway, it is the result of the awareness of people loaded with memories of harmfulness. Let me read this again. Humility is one of the greatest qualities we have because it is the result. It is the result. This is the key. You want to underline. It is the result of the awareness of people loaded with memories of harmfulness. No matter what position the person has or how great the respect people give to him, he is humble. You beginning to grasp the point here? Yeah. So humility also is not a state in which we suffer with our own transgressions of the past. It is a state in which we are above the image that we had in the past. And we are now on the road of freedom from what? From our lower nature. From ego and vanity. We do not feel proud or privileged. Humble people do not feel proud or privileged And now I've lost my place. Here we go. As long as a single memory of hurting a sentient being exists within your memory. So isn't this interesting to think about what humility really is? And I think this is why it's extraordinary to find humble people. Extraordinary, but we can find degrees of humility being expressed in one another. The way to humility is not achieved through denying the existence of these memories, but by using the memories as tools or materials. Okay, how are we going to use these ideas or these experiences of harmfulness? It's so hard to say the thing that we've been harmful to somebody, and oftentimes we're not even aware that what we have said has been harmful in some way. But through the process of meditation, through the process of observation, through the process of getting out of ourselves and paying attention to the environment, then we're going to understand the complicated person, first of all, ourselves. Then we're going to understand how complicated people are. To also understand about the subconscious life of others. Subconscious, the subconscious mind. So much has been written in the teaching, particularly by Torgrim Serdarian, about the subconscious mind. We're in the process now of reading the 3 volumes and studying them in the group classes. And there's also a book called The Chalice and the Subconscious Mind. So here are 4 books that cannot be matched anywhere. You cannot find the information anywhere. But as you begin to study consciousness and subconscious mind, you begin to realize how the subconscious mind pretty much controls everybody's mouth, pretty much controls everybody's thoughts, pretty much controls everybody's actions, even though our personality life will deny it. But when we're on this spiritual path and we are striving to reach Shambhala, and we are in some cases almost pleading with hierarchy to allow us to serve, to be their servant, to help manifest the plan on earth, then we must confront these concepts. We must confront, as we understand these concepts, our own subconscious nature. And by our own hands and feet begin to either transform or completely eradicate what is in that subconscious mind. Because until we do, we can be of no service to hierarchy. It's just not possible, because we will sabotage the plan that hierarchy and the Lords of Shambhala have so sensitively and so creatively, and as knowing is the result of knowing the need of the world, has worked out. You can't give the plan to disciples and initiates who are still living in the subconscious mind, or allowing that subconscious mind to live their life for them. Right? Okay. Once we realize how we have hurt other people, we've been harmful to other people, intentionally, unintentionally, consciously or unconsciously, now we're shifting gears and we're going to find ways to uplift others and to emancipate their minds from lower thought forms. We're going to use such memories as fuel to deepen our own aspiration, to see how cause and effect travel on the path of our life. So we must see that understanding life is impossible if we have not passed through darkness and light. The burning fires of conscience and slavery and freedom. See, don't we see, and I find this difficult sometimes, people pretending to be pure, people pretending to be holy, people pretending to serve hierarchy and the plan, when in essence, it's all self-serving. In the process of self-serving, there is no humility. It is in the process of self-serving where the motive and intent may be right on. The effect is right off. And this is why we have to deal with the law of karma. The law of karma being the law of equalization. It is through meditation that all negative memories of these experiences are gradually drawn to the surface and then used for the service of life. This is so simple. If you just take a few minutes today and really think about what humility is and the cause of humility and how we develop humility, it's for self-confrontation. It is the reality of, for example, you're in a situation, you're in trouble, you need help. Help is given to you, and then the next minute you realize, a few years ago I had a friend that had the same kind of trouble that I'm having today, but I wasn't there for that person. That causes a sense of being humble. The next time the same situation comes up with perhaps the same friend or another friend, you're going to be right there uplifting them, encouraging them, inspiring them. Not because of who you are, but because of what you've learned. Do you get it? Yes? Okay. Nature helps us to forget many past memories. Even the subconscious mind throws them out and makes them vanish. But the permanent atoms keep the records. Such records can be annihilated only through our true self, the divine self that is unfolding our nature. So a person who is fused with his or her own divine self is a person of the deepest humility, because when one becomes his true self, he also becomes one with the self existing in all beings. Once a student asked her teacher, "Why do you pray for your sins? Day and night you bless the world." He answered, "But I had many failures in my past." The student said, "But I am talking about now. I'm talking about the present." He said, "In the present, in the now, I share all the sins and failures of those who love me, including yours, and also the sins and failures of all those who never heard me, who never heard about me. I pray that the whole body of humanity enters the road of transfiguration." That's humility. And this is why it's so rare. humiliation. Humiliation is a necessary pressure on the personality by the inner guardian to release the spiritual consciousness in us. I remember many years ago, back when I was living in Florida, and we were having a beautiful conference that Torkim taught for about 5 days. And for whatever reason, that particular conference, I had maybe a dozen enemies. They were there because they loved Torkim, not because they loved me, just the opposite. So here we were in the afternoon. We were talking about the subconscious mind, interestingly enough. And Torkim asked us a question. I was so excited, I knew the answer. So I raised my hand and I said, this is the answer. I was so excited, so proud. And he yells back at me, called me a name, and said, you are so wrong. Imagine in front of all my enemies, who you know darn well were positioned there, and he knew it. Let's see how she's going to handle that. Well, not too well. It took a few years to really understand the whole process. I do, the process behind it, the releasing of the spiritual consciousness was not immediate. But without the pressure of humiliation, our personality grows at the expense of spiritual values. So this is when I learned the value of having a great teacher who had the ability to put that kind of pressure, on me. And that wasn't just a single incident. It happened frequently. It happened in membership meetings. It happened when I was only with him, when I was in a state of bliss. Humiliation was just on the other side of the door. But what a great gift. Now, that doesn't mean that we all have the right to and permission to humiliate everyone around and about us. We must have a consciousness that is higher, that is above all the hurts and the wrongs and the harmfulness that we have delivered to other people. But see, that's the balance, that's the equality of knowing what the fire of humility is all about and what it wasn't when we were engaged in hurting others, consciously or unconsciously. So when a teacher has the ability to humiliate us, it's purposeful. It's not to hurt us, but to create a pressure that will release the spiritual consciousness in us. So he had to know where to push the button and whether or not that soul was mature enough to respond appropriately and to grow from it. One experience took me 12 years to learn from. That long. It's a gift that just keeps on giving. The teaching tells us that there are many kinds of pressures needed to cause certain alchemical changes in the whole structure of a human being. It is the feeling you experienced when you came face to face with losing your reputation, prestige, losing your honor, and being considered a failure. If you haven't lost your reputation at some point in your life, if you haven't lost your prestige, if you haven't been dishonored, if you've never failed, you're not on the spiritual path. You're still building your personality life. Isn't that wonderful? You think, no, it hurts. It's all right, it's supposed to. There is a very strong pressure created as a result of these experiences to crack very hard crystallizations in our nature. But they cause the spirit to release itself. This is why in the book Challenge for Discipleship, we are told that the teacher must have nerves of steel. And this is one of the reasons. So that pressure, this strong pressure, whether it is by a teacher or just by the process of our journeying, through this life, cracks this hard crystallization in us, and it is hard. See, we're living in a society today. I was just thinking about, some of these mega churches that are out there now, where there's no solemnity, lots of bands and singing and entertainment going on, applause taking place, and the pastors or the ministers or the evangelistic ministers are telling us how perfect we are, how beautiful we are, how everything good, only good is going to be given to us. Well, on one hand, that is a feel-good lecture, and it brings the masses back, into these mega churches. But what happens when you lose your reputation? What happens when you're dishonored? With this stream of thinking, that stream of thinking, and those kind of services, you turn against God. You turn against life. How could God do this to me when the pastor promised me the most beautiful life ever? See, there's no humiliation taking place. In other words, we have been so crystallized to thinking of what? Of what is due to us, that when we lose, then we lose contact with the purpose. We lose contact with hierarchy. We lose contact with God because we turn our back. So to be humbled is a gift to our soul. Now here's an example that some of you may have experienced. Many years ago, my husband and I found ourselves facing a bankruptcy. It was in the mid-1970s when there was a market crash similar to what we had in 2008. Several of our clients who had owed a substantial amount of money, actually in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, were unable to pay their monthly accounts with us. It forced us to close our business and to declare bankruptcy. My husband was then left to find another job to support his family, our family. A situation where he moved from being wined and dined by bank executives and corporation presidents to working behind a counter at a 24-hour business similar to 7-Eleven, those stores. Those who at one time had been clamoring for our money and our business, now he was serving behind this counter. It was humiliating for both of us, but only momentarily. I learned firsthand what is essential in life: integrity, honesty, and good friends, as did he. I was very proud of him, and to this day I admire how he took care of our family and did not allow pride to disrupt his life. And interesting, that job weeks into the job, he was promoted to manager, and then they wanted to bring him into the home office, you know, just quickly like that to progress because they saw his experience. And then he went into business for himself. That was it. But that was a moment of being humiliated. It is not how much money we have. It is our ability to stand tall and do what we have to do to survive with honor. It is about faith in our future and in ourselves. Do you see? Another one is the feeling when you confront the loss of all you have. If you've ever experienced that, you know the humiliation that follows. Another pressure is a feeling that one experiences when facing the presence of death, whether it is your own death or someone close to you. Another one is a feeling you experience when someone proves that your whole reasoning and logic are based on illusions. We don't want to hear that. Life causes such feelings or pressures to liberate us and to allow the released spirit to find its way to higher dimensions. Such experiences give us intense joy, spiritual contentment, ecstasy, and wonderment, admiration and bliss. There are moments in our life when we experience such pressures. This is how the seeds of flowers of great achievements spread and grow and unfold. So just take a look at your life. Look at what you have. You know, when you look at what you have, what is important to you? How did you get there? How did it get there? What is your thinking? Do you use today everything you have in service for hierarchy, in service for the plan, in helping the needs of others? Or is it still for me, me, me? Nature has its days and nights and its seasons. It is interesting that we do not have continuous days and we do not have continuous nights. We are born into the rhythm of nature, not only in the physical dimension, but also in the emotional and mental dimensions. Nature expects equality in all conditions. This is a very, very big law. In nature, listen to this, this is so valuable. In nature, the greatest mind may be, in the meantime, the smallest. And the higher is the lowest. So what does this mean? There are states of consciousness that act against the law of equality. For example, these states are pride, vanity, ego, even arrogance. So where you may have the greatest mind in the world, if you have pride and vanity and ego and arrogance, you are the smallest. Such states of consciousness evoke attacks from the neutral, the unbiased law called the law of karma. This law demands equality or equalization. That's the law of karma. In other words, those who think that they are better than others are the breakers of this law. You cannot think about the small without thinking about the great. Enlightened ones are those who are one with all that exists. And we must get back into that way of thinking. Society doesn't promote it. The media doesn't promote it. Financial institutions don't promote it. The stock market does not promote it. But the great ones exemplify it. There is only the one self, and whatever we do to others, we do to ourselves. But it takes a long time of suffering and pain to realize this fact. Some people have the tendency to live for themselves. They search for prosperity, think and grow rich, health, and happiness, but just for themselves. Or sometimes their family unit, but not outside themselves or their family unit. And sometimes at the expense of their own health and happiness and prosperity. To live life for oneself is a great act of slander against the law of karma, against the law of equalization. Is this too heavy? No. Oh, good. Okay. It's a little heavy. It's a little heavy. It's making us think. Those individuals or groups who can overcome separatism and superiority and stop thinking in terms of being chosen and saved and liberated and that they are more fortunate than the rest, will then become the greatest benefactors of humanity. They are the ones who will eventually awaken humanity to understand the mystery of oneness. And this is why we must spread the teaching. This is why we have the YouTube of our Sunday lectures and our meditations and our publications and so forth, so that we can share this beautiful teaching. Now, the heavy psychological pressures happening to individuals and groups and nations are warnings. They're warnings to us. They're warnings to the world to make them turn toward unity, to make them turn toward balance, toward an inclusive consciousness in which they realize that they share all that humanity has and is. The feeling of humiliation creates balance within your psyche and leads you to the awareness that you are acting against the law of equalization. The goal of this law is to make us realize that until we live for the interests of the plan, we have no value. Humiliation is a moment of contact with our higher self. Isn't that interesting? Humiliation is a moment of contact with our higher self. And when we have that moment of contact with our higher self, or with our teacher, then we see our own ugliness. And there's the pressure and the humiliation. And ego makes you believe that you are the most important existence. You think about yourself as a separate being from the rest of existence. I had a friend who used to say, "You people." In all her conversations, she would distance herself from everyone by saying, "You people." I never understood it, for she was talking about her friends and her family and others. She would always refer to us as "you people." Then I realized one day, that she thought of herself as a separate being from the rest of us. Isn't that interesting? Now, I want to say something that may be a hard pill to swallow. But if you really think about it, if you are really honest with yourself, you will see the truth in what I am going to say. And this is a quote from the teaching. You need to realize your insignificance within all of creation. Try to realize how transient you are, how limited you are. In other words, it is healthy to realize that the phenomena of man is a nothing. As we strip ourselves of being so important and lead ourselves to the realization that we are nothing, we chase away all of our fears, our anxieties, and irritations like our garments, and we feel free. I know you've heard this statement that I'm about to say. We have to lose ourselves to find ourselves. You see that? Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a moment and ask for questions, and then I'll wrap this up. I know I usually don't do this, so you're not prepared, but surely you had questions, you know, and listening to what was being stated. So, what do you think about humiliation? And stripping ourselves of being so important, and the realization that we are nothing. How do you feel about this?
I think when we are humiliated, it makes us stop. It really does, stop us in our tracks. And if we think about it being an opportunity for a contact with a higher self, it can, like you're saying, can be beneficial in the long run. It may take a couple of days or months or years, but if we think that was a contact with my higher self instead of that was a moment of humiliation, I think that can be a real turning point.
What about gratitude? Let's say that something that you have done in your life has caused or brought dishonor to yourself or to your family. And you go through this dark night. And then you get out, you get on the other side. And pretty soon the light starts coming back into your life. The smallest thing you have gratitude for. I am so grateful, to have green grass on my lawn. I am so grateful to have a roof over my house. Even though it may be the smallest house in the wealthiest community, we're so grateful for it. Or I'm so grateful for being alive and still thinking how I can be creative and help others. Until we are humiliated for whatever reason that life is designed to teach us through humiliation, it is that moment where we have contact with the real.
All those years with Torquem, I was in a state of constant humiliation. And every time I got zapped, it was an opportunity to grow, and I was always grateful. And I don't know how he did it, all of us, but there wasn't a person in the audience that somehow didn't.
Right.
Every lecture, and it was always an opportunity to grow, and I was so grateful.
Thank you. Yes, and we remember those moments forever, don't we? Yes. Catherine, you had your hand up.
Is it the humiliation that eventually takes us to this state of realizing our nothingness? How do we reach that state?
I don't know that I have the answer. I can tell you just as a musician, let's take an example, as a violinist, when I was but a child, you know, and I would hear the greats play, like Heifetz and Milstein. Those are two of my favorite violinists. And I would, in all my ignorance, I would listen to their music. I went to their concerts. I had, well, you know, I heard that note was off a little bit, right? And, well, maybe he's tired tonight because he doesn't seem to, you know, all the criticism of high school, you know, blooming ego, you know, experience. And then I got to college, in the conservatory, the music conservatory, where everybody was better than I was. And for a while, I was like a little mouse. I didn't want to play in front of anybody. I had great teachers. I didn't want to go to music lessons because everybody was so much better than I was. And then one day I decided, what a fool you are. What a wonderful gift you have to be around great people, you know, and wonderful performers. And I began to learn from them true music, you know, from the inside out, not just technically being good. And that's how I develop humility, because there's always going to be somebody greater than you. And you want to always be around somebody greater than yourself, because that's the pressure of humility. Okay, do you get it? So always be around somebody greater than yourself and you'll be humiliated. Terry. Okay, never mind. Okay. So let me close with this. You see, egotism is a state of consciousness in which a person overemphasizes his or her value. It is true that a person loses all his self-existence. Who loses all his self-existence can turn into an irresponsible person who gives up. If he is not grounded esoterically, he must realize that the dissipation of his unreality will lead him into reality, into the realization that he has a true self, a divine self. Humility is not only the result of awareness of our past failures. Humility also can be achieved if we see and realize exactly where we are on the chain of evolution. A teacher once told his son, "A horse in a little garden feels very big, but in a desert, he feels small." Similarly, if you compare yourself with a mosquito, you may think that you are a giant. But if you compare yourself with those who have achieved high summits of labor and creativity, you may feel humble. Amen. Thank you for staying with me this morning with this kind of heavy talk. You know, usually I try to put a little humor in the talks, but it just didn't seem to quite fit this morning. You know, but I learned a lot by putting this talk together about a subject that I thought I was pretty knowledgeable about. But I had not even touched the surface. So we learned together this morning.